We are told that on the afternoon of September 11th, 2001, World Trade Center 7 became the first high-rise steel frame building in history to fully collapse symmetrically through itself due to office fires. The incident was investigated by the world's leading forensic building experts who declared that they couldn't get a handle on it. This is probably because they decided to break the law and remove evidence from the scene of the crime despite the protests from many independent experts. Then pieces of steel from World Trade Center 7 were set aside and documented as they were severely eroded without any rational explanation. NIST's lead investigator was then photographed 3 times posing by one particularly interesting beam. Later, it was denied that they had any steel from World Trade Center 7 to study. Many years and millions of dollars were taken in programming a computer to simulate the collapse to discover the cause. The resulting animation, which bore no resemblance to actual videos of the collapse, was then produced with fanfare. Then they declared that the answer had been staring them in the face all the time, and it wasn't a mystery at all. Obviously, the fires had caused a new phenomenon called differential
thermal expansion.
Oddly, this new phenomenon had been known about for many decades. The NIST experts must have skipped that particular lecture when studying. Another lecture they missed while on the beach related to Newton's laws. It took a high school teacher to inform them that World Trade Center 7 fell at freefall acceleration for 2.25 seconds and 108 feet. Such an event cannot occur unless there is zero resistance across the entire building simultaneously. That news didn't faze NIST though, and the report went ahead despite this anomaly. NIST then declared that their computer model, the one that didn't compare in any way with the videos of the actual event, had revealed to them that the initiation of the collapse began with the failure of a single connection where a floor girder met a vertical column. Thus, the mystery was solved by a computer model that didn't resemble the real event. They then classified the data used for that model and refused to release the information so that others could check their work, declaring that such a release would jeopardize public safety. Having discovered this new phenomenon, NIST then declared that fire had heated steel beams, but not the concrete floor supported by that steel. This is despite the entire world's steel frame designers have for decades built such a composite floor system specifically because it prevents differential
thermal expansion.
The new phenomenon had then caused steel shear studs to, shear, something they are designed not to do. Not content with that, NIST then declared that essential shear studs on the critical girder had been omitted, left out, never installed. Once again, this is something that every steel erector and flooring contractor will assert would never happen and would have been rejected by the building inspector before authority to pour concrete would be granted. NIST did what they do and ignored this completely. Having cleared the deck for the next phase of the explanation, NIST then asserted that floor beams, now free of those annoying restraints, expanded further as the heat increased and pushed the 13th floor girder, the one without the shear studs, remember, sideways from its 11-inch seat by 5.5 inches. Halfway was enough to allow the girder to fall off its seat as the flange would fold upwards as the full load came beyond the vertical web. This 5.5-inch distance was carefully selected because too low a heat and it wouldn't have pushed far enough. Too much heat, and it would have sagged instead of pushing. The seat had to also be 11 inches, remember, for this to work. Exactly the perfect heat was apparently reached to expand the beams to their maximum push ability, but not hot enough to sag the beams and prevent that pushing ability. Just right. A further problem was that in the area of the claimed failure, the fire had long since burned out completely and moved on to another part of the building. But of course, this well-documented fact had also to be ignored by NIST. Then, independent researchers found that the seat was in fact 12 inches, and that 5.5 inches move wasn't enough after all. NIST claimed a typo to explain this 11 or 12-inch error, and then fortuitously found another typo that changed the 5.5 inches to 6.25. Nothing to see here. Move along, move along. All was still well with their theory. Unfortunately, they had already used the Goldilocks claim about just right, so they had to ignore the conflict about how the extra push from the previous max of 5.5 inches to 6.25 inches was achieved. Then the independent researchers discovered that the drawings actually showed what are known as stiffener plates on the girder, which meant that the girder flange would not have folded even if pushed 10 inches or more, an impossibility from heat expansion. NIST had to completely ignore this information, which is clearly shown in all the drawings. To summarize, we have a computer model that bears no resemblance to the real videos. We have the refusal to release the data used to produce their animation as it would jeopardize public safety. A profound mystery that is suddenly a no-brainer, a connection failure that cannot happen, fire causing failure when it had burned out hours before, shear studs that all of the industry maintained had to be there were said to have been left off this particular girder. Many errors in the NIST representation of the elements making up that connection, mostly simply ignored. Eutectic steel erosion that is ignored despite the NIST lead investigator being photographed 3 times posing by such evidence. Freefall acceleration measured and acknowledged that cannot happen in a normal gravity-driven collapse. 2,000 fully qualified architects and engineers who don't accept the Goldilocks fairy tale. This has been a story about the initiation of the collapse of World Trade Center 7. But if you disagree with NIST's report, you're a paranoid conspiracy theorist and deserve to be shunned by all humanity. If you have any questions about this story, you're a batshit paranoid tinfoil dog abusing baby hater and you will be reviled by everyone. If you love your country and your freedoms, happiness, rainbows, rock and roll, puppy dogs, apple pie, and your grandma, you'll never, ever express doubts about any part of this story to anyone, ever. This has been a public service announcement brought to you by the friends of the FBI, CIA, DIA, mainstream media, because ignorance is strength.